All right. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF video. Welcome back. It's been so long. At least it feels like it's been so long. Haven't been able to stream in a while, so I apologize on that. I also have apologized that we have not been as consistent on the FNAF Friday Fast Fest Friday, as we all know and love. At least I do. I just been busy, unfortunately. I was, taking a break, seeing family, and I'm not sure when everyone's going to be seeing this, but the way I'm recording it right now on stream and everything, it is also Thanksgiving next week, so I'm going to be seeing family again. So I saw family last week, and then next week is Thanksgiving, so I'm going to see family again. So because of my schedule and everything, because I'm seeing family, I'm going to be away for weeks on end. I want to at least keep the streaming up, and I at least want to keep the FNAF streaming up, because now that we are at the right date right now, the right date of November 21st, we are officially just under 2 weeks from the FNAF 2 movie coming out. And I cannot wait for it. I am excited for it. I'm not the type of person to do this kind of thing, which is crazy. I keep seeing like videos on my recommended page from like Universal or Blumhouse of like interviews with the cast. Like I saw one where Matt Pat, the game theorist, Matt Pat, the GOAT, the person who started this whole FNAF theory conglomeration of why I'm doing what I'm doing today because of him. I saw that he was interviewing the cast and like testing them on their FNAF knowledge. And I've been watching those types of videos, which is crazy because I'm not the type of person when it comes to movies or shows or games or anything. I'm not the type of person to watch like behind the scenes interviews with like the cast members, but I don't know, like FNAF 2's got me in a chokehold and I'm doing it. And I want to know everything I can about FNAF 2 before the movie comes out. For instance, I would not have known this, but because I was watching those said interviews, I now know this. There's a female investigator, detective, Sherlock Holmes character in the movie, and her name is Lisa. And from everything that I've read and just based on my knowledge and memory of this entire series, once again, I've said this time and time again, I'll keep saying this, I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about the series. I have been fully consumed by the series since it first came out in 2014, right? And to my knowledge, Lisa has never existed, has never been a character. And I was like, is that FNAF? Like, because at first I was like, maybe Lisa's like a character from like a book that they like took inspiration from and they put it in like the movie context kind of thing. Not really in the same breath as what they did with, characters like, Vanessa, the security guard, being in the first movie, even though we know technically the first movie was based off the first game, and we know Vanessa is tied to, the Pizza Plex, security breach, help wanted, stuff that from a time perspective is a lot later on. Same thing goes for, let's just say Garrett, for instance. Garrett may be another character that was made just because of the movies, right? I don't know if they are tied to the FNAF 4 Crying Child, which I guess leads into the video that we're going to be reacting to here, because it's all about FNAF 4. And honestly, I'm very curious what this video is going to be about. Because if you know me, I've said this before, and I'll say it time and time again. FNAF 4 is the Dark Souls Elden Ring version of FNAF. Not only is the game difficult, but I'm, a little proud of that. I was able to practically beat it, so a little proud about that. But also from a story, figuring out lore perspective, it is the most complicated of the series, by far. I mean, when FNAF 4 first came out in, I want to say it was, 2015? 2014, 2015? When it was a hot press debate and people were very, very passionate about it. It was either taking place in 1983 or 1987. And the people who thought it took place in 1983 were very passionate about it and vehemently hated the people who said it was 1987. On the flip side, the people who said FNAF 4 takes place in 1987, they were also doing the same thing and hating the people who said it was taking place in 1983. So you can see why FNAF is very complicated, just in general, but FNAF 4, it's a whole nother, side of the realm. Where, yeah, the FNAF story is complicated and confusing, and I don't think it'll ever be solved, and that's why I'll be doing these types of videos till the day I die. But FNAF 4, we still don't know what the story's about. And the game came out a decade ago, and we still don't know. And hey, shout out to Dakota for the sub. Appreciate it. All right, let's just hop into it.
There isn't much known for sure in Five Nights at Freddy's, but there are a few things that are either directly confirmed or have enough evidence that they're treated as confirmed by most of the fanbase. While some of these topics may still be debated, one that is generally taken as fact is that the FNAF 4 minigames where the crying child gets bitten by Fredbear take place at Fredbear's family diner. After all, the animatronics present are Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. The game takes place in the early 80s, before most of the games except for the recent Secret of the Mimic, and Fredbear's was the predecessor to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. However, just because something is widely believed, that doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And the more
it's just a theory.
I've looked into the topic, things just haven't added up the way they should. From the route between the crying child's home and the restaurant, to the connection Secret of the Mimic has to Fredbear's in the events of FNAF 4, to the animatronic the crying child is implied to possess, to the very year the game takes place, I've become increasingly convinced that the crying child wasn't bitten at Fredbear's family diner. Instead, I think the bite of 83 happened at one of the first Freddy Fazbear's pizzas, and I have the evidence to prove it.
Oh, okay. Start off hot. So if you don't know what any of that means, let me break it down to you for a second. So, going location to location, here's a location timeline. You have Fredbear's Singing Show that took place in like the 40s. That the only thing we know of was that poster we saw from Security Breach, like Fredbear's Singing Show from the 40s. And then you have Fredbear's Family Diner, as we're talking about. That's what the whole video is going to be about. But then you have the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. That location is in 1985, and that is what the game and book Into the Pit is about. So the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location is 1985 Into the Pit. And then you get to 1987, which was FNAF 2. And then you get to FNAF 1, which I've gone with the mindset that it's like 1992, 1993, just because it lines up with the minimum wage hourly rate on the paycheck, and also it ties to a real life event that happened at Chuck E. Cheese in like, was it Aurora, Colorado? In like 1992, 1993. And we all know Chuck E. Cheese and FNAF, there's a lot of similarities. I don't think that is much of a hot take. And then you get to FNAF 3, which is the Freddy Fazbear like horror attraction, which was, if I'm not mistaken, either 20 or 30 years after the original was shut down. The original being the Into the Pit location, 1985. So that would be 2005 would then be FNAF 3, the horror attraction. And then you get to like the Pizza Plex era, which I want to say is like in the 2020s. Got all that? Cool. All right. So just pulling back the current for a second, that's what we're talking about. Fredbear's Family Diner is not FNAF 4. FNAF 4 is tied to Into the Pit. Okay.
set the stage, since most of the games I'm going to be pulling information from are multiple years old at this point, I think it's a good idea to give a refresher on the relevant games and the information we have from them before I get into the meat of why I'm attempting to overturn one of the most widely agreed upon pieces of lore in franchise history. Technically speaking, we see Fredbear for the first time in FNAF 1, though at this point in the timeline, the character—
Technically, I'm not, well, maybe I am doing the, nerd with the glasses. Actually, that is not Fredbear. That is just Golden Freddy. Spooky, ghost, haunted, maybe possessed Golden Freddy. Fredbear, hold up. Just because I want to be granular for a second. Hold up. I don't want y'all seeing my search history. All right, hold on. So, man, don't y'all enjoy this? Has it been so long since not only we did a FNAF video, but I'm having to pull images just to prove my point and what I'm saying? Just memories, you know? All right. So we got one. Now, numero dos. Ah, get out of here, AI. Get out of here. Okay. I promise it's worth it. Okay. So if I bring in these images, all right, so here is what I was talking about. There you go. Right? See him? Golden Freddy, the ghost from FNAF 1, right? Very clearly, that's the same person, right? This is Golden Freddy. Now, like, side-by-side comparison. There you go. Can't even tell it's the same person. Or maybe you can. But this, as ID Fantasy put it, this is Fredbear. And not only this is Fredbear, but this is FNAF 4 Fredbear. So we're being very specific of name, but also the game we're talking about. This is Fredbear. And I know what you're thinking, like, what's the difference? Why am I being such a big deal about all this? It's because the details of design differences. You can see Golden Freddy, the one on the left, and you're showing from FNAF 1, the ghost, is slumped over and is a golden bear with a black bow tie and a black hat. Right? But Fredbear, the one beside it from FNAF 4, is a golden bear but with purple hat and bow tie. So the accessories are different. The left is Golden Freddy, the right is Fredbear. Now, why does all this mean anything? Because if we go back to the video, just rewind a couple seconds. Get out of here, Fredbear. This is night 5 of FNAF 4. The scene you're talking about of the FNAF 4 crime child getting shoved in the mouth of a Golden Freddy character, right? Obviously, unfortunately, the text screen is, blocking off the top half so you can't see the hat. But you can very clearly see that is a purple bow tie. That's not Golden Freddy, that's Fred Bear. So it sounds like a very small detail I'm nitpicking here, but it's very important to be consistent. When there's a Golden Freddy with black accessories, it's Golden Freddy. But when it's purple accessories, it's Fred Bear. And we also saw that in Ultimate Custom Night, where if you played Ultimate Custom Night with just Golden Freddy, and you set him to the level 1 out of 20, you set him to level 1, and you put a death coin on him, it went from the normal ghostly spirit Golden Freddy that we were just showing, the image with the black accessories, but you use the death coin on him, and it changes to Fred Bear, and it shows and you get a jump scare of not Golden Freddy, the black bear, the golden bear with the black accessories attacking you. It's Fred Bear with the purple accessories jump scaring you. The Nightmare Freddy remits his Low-Key Heat. Hey, maybe we'll react to it as well, because Nightmare Freddy is based off of FNAF 4. So, hey, it all relates.
4 minigames where the crying child gets bitten was the predecessor. Crying child, like the crying, wasn't bitten at Fred Bear's.
Okay, we're back to where we're going. Apologies on the rewind, but I just wanted to prove my point of consistency of Golden Freddy versus Fred Bear. All right, once again, you got all that? Cool. Let's continue.
Family Diner. Instead, I think the bite of 83 happened at one of the first Freddy Fazbear's pizzas, and I have the evidence to prove it. To set the stage, since most of the games I'm going to be pulling information from are multiple years old at this point, I think it's a good idea to give a refresher on the relevant games and the information we have from them before I get into the meat of why I'm attempting to overturn one of the most widely agreed upon pieces of lore in franchise history. Technically speaking, we see Fredbear for the first time in FNAF 1, though at this point in the timeline, the character is known as Golden Freddy due to having been modified and having his accessories altered a bit in the time since the character was in his original Fredbear form.
There we go. Sorry about that. And yes, this is what I was talking about, is Golden Freddy attacks you, but this is Ultimate Custom Night, the jump scare of use the death coin, and it's faint, but you can see very clearly that is a purple bow tie.
However, the first mention of the name Fredbear itself, or Fredbear's Family Diner, came in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, where
yeah, first mention is the phone call in night... There's obviously no phone calls in night 7. Night 6. The Lord night. Because phone guy's talking about like, oh, what on earth are you doing there? FNAF 2, the place like shut down and everything. And he says like, oh, it's too dangerous for you to leave in the middle of the night and everything, just finish your shift. And in the meantime, we're going to try to contact the original restaurant owners. And I think the name was Fredbear's Family Diner. I want to say word for word, that's what the phone call was. I've heard that phone call enough times, I think that's what it was.
Where after the incident that is heavily implied to be William Afton going for round 2 of murders at Freddy's during the day shift, the phone guy mentions that they're trying to get in
There we go! I nailed it!
Contact with the owner of the original restaurant.
Do not play with me on my FNAF knowledge.
Which he thinks is called Fredbear's Family Diner, though the restaurant has been closed for years and he doesn't think they'll be able to track anyone down. While FNAF 3 doesn't mention Fredbear's directly, an old recording of Phone Guy does mention Fredbear himself as one of 2 Springlock animatronic suits that, along with Spring Bonnie, was used at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza he worked at up until multiple simultaneous Springlock failures at a sister location led to them no longer being used.
I would say when it comes to that, Stage 01 is the first mention, like physical showing, if you will, of Fredbear's Family Diner. Because we know Fredbear's Family Diner is a small establishment with 2 Springlock animatronics. Those animatronics being a Springlock Golden Freddy and a Springlock Golden Bonnie. And once again, where in the series do you see a setting where it's just 2 animatronics on stage, a Golden Freddy and a Golden Bonnie? Here, FNAF 4, Fredbear's Family Diner. We also know their Springlock suits, and we also know even more details on it that William Afton designed the Spring Bonnie one that goes on to be Springtrap and the Killer. Meanwhile, Henry, it's widely assumed he designed the Golden Freddy one, and he wore that one. Now, does that mean Henry here is the one wearing the FNAF 4 Fredbear suit? Hey, that'll be a crazy first appearance from Henry.
Springlock suits doubled as animatronics and costumes, with Springlocks being wound to hold the animatronic parts to the sides of the suits for a human performer to fit inside. However, the Springlocks weren't the most stable, and if they failed, the metal parts would return to their original positions, regardless of whether or not there was still a person in there, which we see happen to William Afton in the End of Night minigames after he gets into the Spring Bonnie suit. Then we get to FNAF 4, which comes in two parts. One part has us play as a crying child in the year 1983, who hears his Fredbear plushie talking to him and is bullied by his older brother for being scared of animatronics, despite liking plushies of Fredbear and the Freddy's characters. The crying child lives within walking distance of a restaurant where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie Springlock suits were in use, and a picture of Fredbear is on the wall of the restaurant, though there is a TV show and plenty of toys and other merch that depict the main Freddy's game as well. This part of the story comes to a head on the crying child's birthday, when the older brother and his friends, all wearing masks of the Freddy's characters, put the crying child in the mouth of the Fredbear animatronic, which happens to bite down, leading to what's known as the Bite of 83, and the crying child later flatlining in the hospital. The other part is a bit more complicated, but based on the FNAF 1 phone call audio and the ambiance,
there's a 1 in 40 chance, 1 in 200 chance on night 2 and onwards for a reverse and low-pitched version of Phone Guy's Night 1 phone call from the first going to be heard as background ambience. It simply plays in short fragments, and it'll play at either 30 or 60% volume before being muted. We know that there's a literal phone toy in the bedroom.
the random hospital equipment, medication and flowers that can appear, the map and sister location, the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, and the Phone Guy interactive novel, the main nights of FNAF 4 are the crying child haunting his older brother Michael Afton, who is a security guard at Freddy's in FNAF 1 by sharing his memories with him. Part of that is presumably in the form of the 8-bit minigames, but during the main nights, Michael is forced to take the role of his little brother facing down nightmarish versions of the Freddy's animatronics. It turns out, William Afton was always an awful parent, because in the underground facility that would eventually become the setting of Sister Location, he set up these rooms to experiment with fear in children by making them face nightmarish situations by pumping the rooms full of nightmare hallucination gas. While the Tales from the Pizzaplex books have a random kid named Rory be the one who experiences the experiments, the fact that the Tales books aren't in the game continuity, how a similar instance of a random character taking the place of the player character in FNAF 3 happens in the Fazbear Frights books, and other things I go over in a previous video more specifically dedicated to Midnight Motorist, it seems like the victim of the nightmare experiments in the game timeline was the crying child, which likely factored into his fear of the animatronics that we see in the 8-bit minigames. This is backed up by Sister Location, which not only has a map that shows the bunkers connected to each of the locations from FNAF 4, but in the private room, there's a Fredbear plushie with what looks like a walkie-talkie, as well as cameras that show the FNAF 4 rooms when the code 1983 is put into the pin pad, showing how William ran and monitored the nightmare experiments from there. The next
Also, it's a small detail, but I figured I'd mention it since it was just brought up about 1983. When you enter in the year 1983 on the keypad, the cameras go from static, blurry images to actually being clear and showing the FNAF 4 Easter eggs. Just behind the scenes a little bit, the reason why that happened, I'm sure people know about this, but hey, I get new people all the time and everything, and if you don't know, because I understand it's been over a decade at this point, I guess I'll share it. People make the argument that Scott Cawthon, the creator of the series, the GOAT, has no idea what he's doing when it comes to story, and he's retconned a lot of stuff, but he said verbatim in interviews that there's only like 1 or 2 times he's ever actually retconned something in this series. One of the times was in Sister Location, fixing an issue. And it was like put as follows, that FNAF 1, the game came out and people to figure out what the story was. FNAF 2, same deal. FNAF 3, same deal. They were able to find all the Easter eggs. Then FNAF 4 comes out, And like I said in the intro, it's very confusing and no one is able to understand what is going on. Which, I mean, at this point, can you blame people for not understanding FNAF 4? I mean, at the time, FNAF 4 was confusing. We didn't know what was going on. Once again, like I mentioned in the intro, the whole fighting passion debate of 1983 versus 1987. But nowadays, it's, do you play as the FNAF 4 crying child? Do you play as Michael Afton? Is Michael Afton the FNAF 4 crying child? Because there's a lot of details in the FNAF security logbook that says Michael Afton was the FNAF 4 crying child. But then, if that's the case, then the older brother who was wearing the Fati mask, who we assumed to be Michael Afton, is the older brother bullying his younger brother. That can't be Michael Afton then, if Michael Afton is the crying child. But now it's, oh no, Michael Afton is the Fati bro. So that's confusing. And then it was at least interpreted at one point that the reason the animatronics are so horrific looking is the sound illusion discs were warping our vision and perception of what animatronics would look like. And now it's, as it was mentioned, a fear experiment with, hallucinogenic gas that was being pumped into the house by William Afton. And you wonder why FNAF 4 is complicated to talk about. But bringing it all back forward of why I brought all that up is FNAF 4 came out, Scott Cawthon was disappointed that no one was able to figure out what the story was of FNAF 4. So he said, I made it clear that there is a common misconception, a detail that was being misunderstood in the next game. The next game being Sister Location. What was that detail that people were misunderstanding? And Scott made clear what his intentions were in Sister Location. The secret room in Sister Location where you type in the code 1983. What year did FNAF 4 take place? 1983.
Game is Pizzeria Simulator, and the main thing of note in the game itself are two of the minigames. One of them is the Security Puppet minigame, which takes place on a rainy night, and in conjunction with the similar minigame in FNAF 2, shows how William Afton's first victim, Charlie Emily, died and possessed the puppet animatronic after being locked outside of Freddy's.
One of the first victims. It's still complicated. There's a debate, there's an argument to be made that Charlie is first. But then there's also other characters that claim they are also first, and it's very frustrating. It doesn't fit cleanly no matter how you slice it.
While there are theories that she wasn't his first victim, considering how she was mentioned as the first victim in both the novel trilogy and the FNAF 2 movie trailer, and how her father in the games claims that he was the first one wounded by William's actions that ended up with the other kids getting killed, I'm inclined to believe she is the first in the games as well. We also,
in my opinion, yes, Charlotte is first. But what's frustrating is, the movie brings it up now. The movie's canonicity, how it fits in timeline, that's up for debate. I feel like when it comes to movies, it's the whole movies versus books versus games, where are they all canon? Does it all fit in the same universe? Are they separate continuities? What is more canon than the other? I feel like we're going to have that conversation. Previously it was books versus games. Now it's books versus games versus movies. But yes, there's a lot of details brought up verbatim that Charlotte is first. Here's the details why. But then you have someone like Ultimate Custom Night, where Susie, who goes on to possess Chica, their death lines are, I was the first, I'm the one who's seen everything. You don't get more explicit than that.
also know it was probably Freddy specifically, since
Now, that's not me saying that I believe Chica is first. I said on record multiple times that I think Charlotte is first. That makes sense from a time perspective because of what stuff like Henry said of a wound first inflicted on me that led spread to others. The wound first inflicted on me, his daughter, Charlotte, being killed that led spread to others, obviously the others being the other kids. That makes sense, right? And it also makes sense because then it's this whole idea of William Afton murdering kids. Henry, his former business partner, is doing everything he can to stop his former business partner from killing. That makes sense. However, you have to squint and you have to look past stuff like you heard in Ultimate Custom Night then.
The character shown in the FNAF 2 version of the minigame has a black, not purple hat and bow tie and is labeled Freddy in the files, and a recently released activity kit talks about how at Freddy's there were wristbands were given to the kids as a souvenir and a way to track them, with a black light drawing of Charlie from the security puppet minigame where she's wearing a wristband to signal to the puppet to keep her in the building, implying that Freddy's giving the kids wristbands is connected to why Charlie has a wristband. Charlie then got trapped outside, William drove up, killed her and drove away, and the puppet made it to her body but collapsed on it due to the rain. This minigame presumably connects to the lore portion of the Midnight Motorist minigame, which takes place on a rainy night and is labeled later that night in the files. We drive home in the rain as a character that is heavily implied to be William Afton, both via his purple car, how the upcoming 5 Laps at Freddy's game has a vehicle called the Midnight Motor with a yellow rabbit antenna, and some other things that I go into more detail about in my Midnight Motorist video. On his way home, he can stop in a clearing that has a weird dirt pile looking thing, and at a building labeled Juniors. If he approaches Juniors, the green character outside tells him he knows he can't be there and to not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Once William reaches his home, going inside reveals a character wearing gray watching TV who tells William to leave some other him alone because he had a rough day, only for William to not do that, and head to his son's room and demand entry. When the door is locked and won't open, William goes outside to try and get in through the window, only to find it broken, with a trail of footprints leading away from it. A pair of 3-toed footprints is visible near a bush, and while William doesn't acknowledge them, he says, "Ran off to that place again. He will be sorry when he gets back." After Pizzeria Simulator comes Help Wanted. There are a few neat lore confirmations here, such as the Faz tokens that confirm Freddy's has been around since 1983, as well as DLC where there's an alternate hub world with a large banner that says Fall Fest 83 and shows a house up on a hill that looks suspiciously similar to the house shown on the FNAF 4 menu screen. Help Wanted also teases the game's security breach by showing its location, the Pizzaplex, under construction. However, what the teaser doesn't show, but security breach itself does, is that the Pizzaplex was built on top of a sinkhole containing a few weird things, including but not limited to a giant Freddy head, the FNAF 6 pizzeria, and an area deeper underground containing a giant old computer labeled mixes, a hostile endoskeleton called the Mimic, and some old fabric costumes that aren't Freddy's related.
Also, I'll let the video play out before I say something.
Help Wanted 2 doesn't go into this too.
Okay, but another thing that was built and connected to the Pizzaplex from the Ruin DLC is a scooping room. Now, is it a prototype scooping room? Or is that the same scooping room we see at the end of the bad ending in Sister Location? If it's the same scooper, right, then that means it's the Sister Location bunker. Which then means Sister Location bunker is connected to the FNAF 4 house. Therefore, the Pizzaplex is connected to the FNAF 4 house. That just shows you how wild it gets.
Too much more, though it does take place in the Pizzeria Simulator location, and has a somewhat notable ending involving playing a VR version of the arcade game that randomly has the sister location elevator in it, which is interesting. However, the next game, Secret of the Mimic, is where things get extra interesting. Set at the earliest point we have in the FNAF timeline, in the year 1979, Fredbear's Family Diner and Chica's Party World are the only Fazbear-related locations that we're aware of being open at the time, with the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza chain being planned to open later. We play as Arnold, a Fazbear technician sent to get the Mimic from Murray's Costume Manor, a former contractor that Fazbear Entertainment acquired. MCM was owned by Edwin Murray, the Mimic's creator, and after the death of his wife and son, Edwin lashed out and the Mimic, specifically the M2 variant, imitated and absorbed his rage, leading to it killing anyone who entered the building. While exploring, there are a few interesting discoveries that can be made. For example, there are messages from characters in the game that you can collect that indicate William was actively poaching Edwin's employees to drive him out of business and acquire his property, including the land his home was built on. Though it wasn't just poaching the employees that damaged Edwin's financial stability. Edwin was banking his ability to recover on the success of the Fazbear project he was contracted to help with, which we see in the games as a prototype of the FNAF 1 location, which interestingly has a giant Freddy head outside of it and contains a machine that looks like Mix's, though this one is primarily active as the original Mimic program M1 and is labeled F10N4 since it copied Fiona, Edwin's wife. The prototype Freddys and MCM are also connected to the Murray household through a series of tunnels, which is an interesting construction choice, and the house itself gets even more interesting in how it holds some of the costumes that show up in the Mimic's area of Ruin, and has a bedroom that has toys from and overall looks suspiciously similar to the FNAF 4 bedroom that shows up on the sister location cameras, though with a different layout. And speaking of bedrooms, if you're interested in getting
Sorry, this video is not Spawn.
Context, and that is the franchise guidebooks. There have been points where the series guidebooks either suggest things are possible that quite literally aren't, say things happened that didn't, or otherwise mess up details about the series. For example, the Ultimate Guide says that sister location takes place at Circus Baby's Pizza World instead of Entertainment and Rentals,
But perhaps the biggest change for this series is the absence of, well, Freddy's. Sister location is set at Circus Baby's Pizza World, an apparent warehouse of animatronics. The animatronics live here, but they're rented out for parties. Yes and no, like you're mixing details. Like, yes, sister location is a warehouse where the animatronics live underground in the bunker and they're rented out for parties. That's true. And it's also true that the animatronics in the sister location bunker came from Circus Baby's Pizza World. That is also true. But the bunker warehouse we see and play as in sister location and Circus Baby Pizza World is not the same thing at all. To my knowledge, we have not seen Pizza World at all. The only thing we know about Circus Baby's Pizza World is it was open for one day, and the only mention we get of it is Baby mentioned it in dialogue in night 2 when you go under the desk, and they say like, oh, I was only on stage but for one day. I was acutely aware of like all the kids that like were in the room with me. There was like 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 2, then 1. Something happened when there was 1. And they were like, wait, what happened when there was 1? We know that 1 being Elizabeth Afton, where if you played the cupcake minigame with Baby in sister location, you're able to get to the end. You release, it's weird, but you release ice cream, lure Elizabeth Afton to you as Baby. Then once Elizabeth Afton is close enough, Circus Baby's like stomach hatch opens, a giant claw comes out, grabs Elizabeth Afton, pulls them inside Baby, and kills them. So that's what happened to Circus Baby Pizza World, and that's what caused it to shut down. But the thing about Fazbear covering up their loose ends and not dressing a skeleton in the closet, it was open for one day because of that incident where an animatronic killed a kid while on duty in business hours. But according to Fazbear, it was closed for one day after a gas leak. Not an animatronic killing a kid while in business. Especially that kid being one of the creator's daughters.
And that Bone Dude in FNAF 3 says that FNAF 3 takes place 30 years after the last Freddy's closed, even though he never actually said that, and a page before the book said we don't know what event FNAF 3 is 30 years after.
Five Nights at Freddy's 3 said 30 years after the horrific events that took place at Freddy Fazbear Pizza. I'm pretty sure... Hold up. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the whole thing about FNAF 3 taking place 30 years after Pizzeria shutting down was from the Steam page. It says it. Yeah. Hold up. Sorry. Apologies for the white screen. I don't know how long that was on screen. Hold on. Just a second. It'll be filled in momentarily. Just bear with me. So yeah, so you can see on the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 Steam page, it says 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed, the events that took place there have become nothing more than a rumor and a childhood memory. But the owners of Fazbear Fright, the horror attraction, are determined to revive the legend and make experience as authentic as possible for patrons going. And it cuts off there. But I want to say that's where the whole FNAF 3 taking 30 years afterwards is, because the Steam page tells us that. It never was told us from Phone Guy in the Games. I don't believe so. I could be wrong. Hey, maybe it did say something like the newspaper clippings. Maybe I'm wrong. But to my knowledge, this is the only piece of evidence that we have that connects FNAF 3 to 30 years after pizzerias were closed. Is the Steam page tells us that. But, once again, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Tell me I'm a big dumb idiot.
I bring this up because in the character encyclopedia, we get two seemingly contradictory pieces of information. While the Crying Child's page says that the restaurant was Fredbear's Family Diner, the locations page says, in reference to the FNAF 4 bedroom, that it's where a child is haunted by terrible memories of a visit to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Considering I doubt that the FNAF 4 minigames could have taken place at both Fredbear's and Freddy's, and how the guidebooks aren't the most reliable, I'm not going to use this information as evidence one way or the other. Another book-related thing I should mention is the interactive novel The Week Before, which is set the week before FNAF 1, when Phone Guy was working security at Freddy's. In the book, the bite of 83 is brought up if you, as Phone Guy, choose to call 1983 on the phone. And the book mentions that while he doesn't remember when the first Freddy's opened or when Fredbear's did, one year that stuck out was 1983, which was known as the year of the Big Bite up until a bite happened again in 1987. Calling the number leads to him hearing the events of the bite of 83 and then getting bitten himself after the sound of crying continues after the call's end. Not only does this strengthen the idea that the crying child's spirit is present at Freddy's, likely in the Golden Freddy suit since it used to be Fredbear, but I find it notable that while Fredbear's Family Diner is mentioned, it's not to say that the bite took place there, and Freddy's is mentioned in the same way in the same sentence. And this connects to the reason why I started considering this theory in the first place. After all, it's pretty widely accepted in the FNAF community that the crying child is one of the spirits in Golden Freddy that was present at the FNAF 1 location, and that's something The Week Before backs up with this scene, and that I go into more depth about in a previous video I'll have linked in the description if you want to check it out. We do know from FNAF 3 that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were used at Freddy's location, since Phone Guy himself recorded.
Before we dive into it more, I feel like my interpretation has always been that, yeah, the FNAF 4 Crying Child is one of the spirits tied to Golden Freddy. I say one of the spirits because Fazbear Frights, the books, one of the book collections, one of the books talked about that there is a world where multiple spirits, multiple souls, dead kids, can be tied to one animatronic, right? And I feel like of all the animatronics we've seen in the series, the one that needs that kind of clarification and has that kind of background context is Golden Freddy. Because for the longest, it's like FNAF 4 Crying Child has all this, imagery of Golden Freddy. He has the second friend Fredbear plush. He gets bitten by a Golden Freddy Fredbear stand-in. Fredbear Golden Freddy is the last thing he sees before he flatlines in the hospital. Night 5, the only animatronic that you are being haunted by is Fredbear. You're being haunted by the character that bit you, right? Ton of Golden Freddy imagery. But then you have someone like Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, who also has a link to Golden Freddy. He is a vengeful spirit. He is what makes Ultimate Custom Night a thing. He is vengeful spirit. He is the one keeping William Afton down there in hell and purgatory because it's a punishment. He is being punished for being more brutal to Cassie than the other kids he killed. If you somehow beat 50-20 in Ultimate Custom Night, you see Golden Freddy twitch in the distance. Cassidy, vengeful spirit, not letting you rest. They will continue being alive. Their soul will continue haunting that Golden Freddy suit. They will not rest. The eyes will never go fully black.
Court's training tapes for using them, but one thing that's bothered me for a while was why the crying child would possess the Freddy's version of Fredbear in the first place if he was bitten by and presumably possessed the Fredbear at Fredbear's family diner. At first I thought that maybe Fredbear just got moved to Freddy's after Fredbear's closed, but then there was the issue of Freddy's opening for the first time in 1983, the same year that FNAF 4 took place. If Freddy's was open simultaneously with Fredbear's, and Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were used at both, why wouldn't they both have their own Fredbears even if Fredbear's family diner eventually shut down? It's not impossible that Fredbear got moved after, of course, but it got me thinking, what if the crying child got bitten at Freddy's instead? Freddy's was open for the first time the year that FNAF 4 takes place after all, and if this was a Freddy's, that could potentially explain not only why he would possess the same Fredbear that went on to become Golden Freddy, but also why there's so much Freddy's merch around, including the bullies' masks. Not to mention, if the Freddy's franchise just started, it makes a lot of sense that William would be spending more time at and hosting his kid's birthday party at a Freddy's instead of the diner that Freddy's is meant to replace. We do have a teaser for FNAF 4 that shows Fredbear's hat and bow tie along with faded text that lines up best with Fredbear's family diner, which seems to imply that the Fredbear in FNAF 4 was the one at Fredbear's, but the source code for the teaser didn't say 1983. It said 1982, the year before Freddy's opened. So what if it was property of Fredbear's in 1982, only to become property of Freddy's in 1983? While this isn't the strongest evidence on its own, with what we know and can otherwise theorize about the Afton house and its proximity to other locations in the games, it would actually line up painfully well. While the FNAF minigames are often simplified in terms of scale, as well as what areas and objects are and aren't shown for the sake of the 8-bit style and locked camera, we do know from the FNAF 4 minigames that the restaurant is within walking distance of the crying child's home, and that the general route he takes is from the restaurant towards the road, turning to his right to continue along the sidewalk by the road, and then right again to go up to his house. And interestingly, this route is pretty much identical to the one we see in Midnight Motorist from Junior's to the Afton house, though the direction of the doors is altered to accommodate the differing camera angle. And while William does drive from Junior's to his home, it's not only a pretty short drive, but there are footprints leading away from the house in the direction of Junior's. The only other thing in that direction is the dirt pile.
I think it depends on... I mean, it's widely assumed, but it's still not confirmed at this point, is when Orange Mustard Man says, oh, we're out to that place again. He'll be sorry when he gets back. We still don't know what that place is. And we also assume that the kid he's referring to is a FNAF 4 crying child. But once again, those are just assumptions.
Which is even farther away, so regardless of which one you think the kid is going to, Junior's is presumably within walking distance. Considering the minigame is labeled later that night and has reigned like the security puppet minigame, I personally think this makes a lot of sense to be later in the night after Charlie was killed, with Junior's being the Freddy's location she was killed at, and William arriving at Junior's is him driving back from wherever he was going in the first place when he stopped to kill Charlie.
Though, maybe this is just me, maybe I have to think about this a little bit more. But Junior's being connected to, Fredbear's family dying and everything. I have to think about that a little bit more. Because something that's said at Junior's is, once again, Orange Mustard Man goes up to Junior's and he sees... presumably an employee, Green Man, stand outside the front door saying, you can't be here, don't make this harder than it has to be, and you drive off. You cannot go in Junior's, there's not a back way, nothing, you can't get closer, nothing. You are turned away at the door. Right? And they make it very, very clear they are turned away from the door. Well, here's the thing. In this series, there was one time where we know of where people are turned away at the door because of an investigation. And we hear that in FNAF 2, where everyone is turned away from the FNAF 2 pizzeria because the FNAF Spring Lock Bonnie suit has been moved. And it's a dangerous suit that should not be worn, but it's been taken. And it also says there's an investigation going on, and people are being turned away from the door, especially previous employees. It says that, and they make mention that as a very specific detail to call out, that even former employees are being turned away at the door. So, that all being said, why would juniors not be FNAF 2? The one and only other time in the series where, especially former employees, are turned away at the door because of an investigation. Why would it just be two separate incidents? That doesn't fit cleanly. So maybe I have to think about it a little bit more, but I want to call that out.
While some have suggested that Junior's is a bar and the green guy is a bouncer, the proximity to the Afton house and connections to the security puppet minigame gives me the impression that it's meant to be the same location as the FNAF 4 restaurant. And wouldn't you know it, but with Freddy's coming after Fredbear's, that would make Freddy's the junior location to Fredbear's Family Diner. The green guy could potentially be bouncer-type character, since based on one of the promotional images for the original FNAF movie, Freddy's did serve beer, though presumably not to the children, I hope. Or he could be telling William that he has to
hope. But I don't know, maybe that's just a nice callback to Chuck E. Cheese, because if I'm not mistaken, was it like 2020, 2021, Chuck E. Cheese started serving beer and alcohol to the adults? I think it was like 2020.
to stay out because there's an active police investigation going on into what happened to Charlie. And it should be pretty obvious to William that he shouldn't be tampering with the crime scene. And even then, Freddy's being a junior location to Fredbear still isn't as far as the evidence goes. Though, real quick first, if you made it this far in the video, you're probably at least somewhat interested in the stuff I cover, so consider subscribing and turning the video notifications on so YouTube will know to show you my content when it comes out. My upload schedule's a bit irregular, so that's the best way to know when I upload, and I've got some fun stuff planned going forward. Anyway, to explain just how far the evidence goes, I first have to talk about how a whole lot of Freddy's construction seemed to happen in the exact same spot. Remember when I mentioned that there was a giant Freddy head and MCM costumes under the Pizzaplex and security breach? Not to mention Mexes in the Mimic? While the Freddy head under the Pizzaplex doesn't look identical, it's similar enough to be reminiscent, especially when combined with the whole finding an extra Freddy's under a building that's not supposed to have one there thing. And with there being so many other similar objects and entities down there, not to mention the tunnels and elevator during the Mimic chase, that makes it seem really likely that not only was the Pizzaplex built on top of the FNAF 6 pizzeria, but that same location is where Murray's Costume Manor used to be. We do know from Secret of the Mimic that after Edwin fell into financial ruin, William ended up with possession of the property, both for the Costume Manor and for the land Edwin's family home was built on, though he assured Edwin that he wouldn't touch the house. We'll be coming back to that later, but that would explain how Fazbear Entertainment would have the ability to build over that property. Not only that, but it seems incredibly likely that the FNAF 6 location and the tunnels underneath the building are connected to sister location. The underground rooms and tunnel system, both in MCM and the underground of the FNAF 6 pizzeria, are reminiscent of Circus Babies, especially considering the Scooper ending of Ruin and Help Wanted 2. Help Wanted 2 takes place in the FNAF 6 location under the Pizzaplex, and while the Vanny mask the player character wears distorts their perception, I find it incredibly suspicious that part of beating the Princess Quest 4 game in Help Wanted 2 involves taking the sister location elevator. Due to the mask, the exact appearance isn't going to be true to life, but either way, it's an interesting detail to include considering the breaker room map in sister location. On that map, there are little squares depicting animatronic locations, including the ones in Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental, but also in both of the Nightmare Experiment chambers, and more importantly, in one building with 2 dots that's in turn connected to a set of 4 rooms that have the exact layout of the Afton house in the FNAF 4 minigames. So since the other 2 areas are underground experiment chambers based on Tales from the Pizzaplex, sister location is connected to the FNAF 4 restaurant. And while these connection symbols could be the path the crying child took, the fact that they're included on this map implies to me that they're meant to represent tunnels considered to be part of Circus Babies, just like some of the other symbols on the map. And if
I mean, they are connected because we literally restore power to FNAF 4. They're labeled like observation rooms. So they are connected, quite literally, because we restore power.
If that's the case, not only would that mean the FNAF 4 restaurant is built in the same spot as Murray's costume manor, but that the tunnels connecting to the Murray house in Secret of the Mimic are now represented on the map by markings connecting to the Afton house. Remember how earlier I mentioned that the house on the hill in Curse of Dreadbear looks identical to the main menu screen of FNAF 4, with both games being connected to the year 1983? To me, this gives the impression that the house on the hill is the one the Aftons were living in during the events of FNAF 4. And interestingly enough, in Secret of the Mimic, the title screen of the game shows Edwin's old house at the top of a hill overlooking Murray's costume manor. And we have a note from William saying that of course he isn't going to touch Edwin's home, except then Edwin goes missing. And Edwin's son's room looks to be the inspiration for the Nightmare Experiment room. And in one of the endings, things start burning down and, well, William owns the land, doesn't he? So why not build a new home and a new restaurant where the old ones used to be, and put his new Nightmare Experiment and dangerous animatronic storage and rental facility in the underground research and development area? He owns that now too, after all. And if he did build a new restaurant over where MCM used to be, I don't think it would have been a Fredbear's. Fredbear's Family Diner was a small single location that we know for a fact already existed elsewhere at the time, and it wouldn't make sense to build another Fredbear's when there were already plans to start a brand new restaurant chain that had a prototype under that very building. A new restaurant chain that was set to open in the year 1983 and feature not just Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, but other animatronic characters that there would have to be merch for. A restaurant chain he would be personally involved with running, so why not move closer to where one of its first locations would be? One where his son would get bitten by Fredbear the year the franchise started, and go on to possess the animatronic, only to be joined by another spirit later on and become Golden Freddy. A new restaurant that would be one of the first Freddy Fazbear's pizza places. For all I know, there's a piece of evidence I overlooked that can't be interpreted to work with the location being Freddy's, but the more time goes on, and the more evidence I see, the more I'm convinced that this has to be the case and that it's something the games have been trying to tell us for years. Why have the road in Midnight Motorist between Junior's and the house mapped so well with FNAF 4 unless Junior's is referring to the Junior location to Fredbear's? Why have so much Freddy's merch involved with the FNAF 4 location in the year Freddy's opened? Why have Golden Freddy seem to have both the crying child and a missing kid's soul? Why imply that the Pizzaplex is on top of a Freddy's on top of sister location that all used to be Murray's costume manor, and that the FNAF 4 house is where the Murray house used to be, unless the Afton house and one of the first Freddy's locations were opened in these locations? The creator of the franchise, Scott Cawthon, has mentioned that he tries to correct things missed in previous games in the subsequent ones that come out. Meanwhile, almost every single game, except for Ultimate Custom Night, the mobile game, and Into the Pit, seem to be pointing in this direction, and I think that's because Scott has been trying to tell us we missed something. Would it make it weird that Fredbear's is mentioned and never shown? Maybe, but the franchise is Five Nights at Freddy's, and if this is the case, it would make it so every FNAF game either takes place in a Freddy's, a place that becomes a Freddy's, or in a location directly connected to Freddy's via whatever sister location has going on, and I think that's pretty fitting, all things considered. I know it's probably not going to be the most popular idea, and for all I know there's something out there that I missed that throws everything out the window, but with the information I'm currently aware of, this is probably one of the theories I'm most confident in.
I like it. Also, as we are wrapping up here and everything, I will say, just like as a closing point, talking about, games we never see Fredbear's Family Diner and everything, Steel Wool has literally said for years, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, ever since the controversy, let's just say, following the release of Security Breach, they've said numerous times that one of the next games they want to make is a Fredbear's Family Diner game. They want to make a Fredbear's Family Diner game, but they also want to make a game tied to Fall Fest. Those are the two big projects that they've said years at this point that they want to target next. So, it's been talks. It's been something that people have mentioned for years. Maybe it's the next game that we get in the series is a Fredbear's Family Diner game. Would that be a little bit weird since there's a lot of Fall Fest imagery following like FNAF VR Help Wanted 2 and some more imagery in Secret of the Mimic? Yeah, it would. But it wouldn't come out of nowhere. And I feel like getting Fredbear's Family Diner imagery plus a game to add some more context would shed light on all this stuff where it's like, is Fredbear's Family Diner connected to FNAF 4? Is it FNAF 4? Is it not? Is it a pizzeria location that in turn will be tied to 1985 with Into the Pit? Maybe. Because another thing I will say, just as a closing part, I just thought about it. is FNAF Into the Pit, right? There was a Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica animatronics. Fotsy, there was a Pirate Cove, but that curtain was constantly shut. But in one of the endings, if Oswald goes down the hallway and stops in front of the Pirate Cove, his eyes will light up. Now, it's not to say he's the one that goes on to possess Fotsy, but it's a nice detail that, in a way, indirectly links Oswald to Fotsy in some way. And remember, in FNAF 4, in the bedroom, you see a Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica plushies in the bedroom in the corner. The Fotsy head detail missing. The head being off. So Fotsy is different than the other plushie animatronics. Fotsy is also the one animatronic who's different in Into the Pit, not being shown. Oswald eyes light up when they pass the Pirate Cove in one of the endings. That's a bit interesting, don't you think? But I'm going to leave you guys with those details as we wrap up here for this week of Freddy Fazbear Fest Friday Fun Time.